Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Professor Dungeon Master's latest video. It's not going so good for D&D 2024 D&D. And how this video and how Professor Dungeon Master is wrong. I mean, so wrong. And this time there's not much of an excuse for it because it's the entire video is marinated in willful ignorance. Now, I don't have any issues with natural ignorance, right? I'm ignorant. I cannot change the oil in my car. I couldn't even change a tire on my car, right? I'm just ignorant. I lack the skills for it, right? And the reason why is I haven't spent time studying these things. It's not something that's important in my world, right? I have a different skill set that allows me to hire people to do that stuff, right? But here's where it gets ugly, when you are being willfully ignorant. So Professor Dungeon Master is sitting over here saying, hey, it's not going to go so well for D&D 2024, and I have this disgruntled employee who's been this person who's been, Mike Burrows, this disgruntled Hasbro employee who now squawks terrible things about Hasbro. Yeah, surprise, surprise. That's, by the way, that's just Ben Riggs' playbook, right? He wanted to really terribly say horrible, terrible things about Lorraine Williams. So what does he do? He gets disgruntled TSR employees and fills a whole book with a bunch of, in my humble opinion, fake numbers, literally stolen out of pulled out of drawers of 15 different disgruntled employees of Lorraine Williams, and then he does a hit job on, Lorraine Williams. This going and getting a disgruntled employee to speak ill of Dungeons and Dragons isn't new. That's Professor Dungeon Master is doing it right now, but that's a Ben Riggs original, right? For slaying the dragon, and the dragon, by the way, if you're wondering, was Lorraine Williams. The whole book is a hit piece against Lorraine Williams, and just another dumpy middle-aged white guy coming in and doing, say, hey, I have an academic book that, because I'm really upset that there was a CEO woman of TSR and D&D for 12 years, right? Actually 11 years, right? It infuriates them. It absolutely infuriates them. And there's just this conga line of books that are just absolute hit jobs. Ben Riggs actually said, he tried to interview Lorraine Williams, and she's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have another one of you dumpy white middle-aged guys come in and just do a hit and ask me a bunch of questions and then make up whatever you want, write whatever you want in a book so that I look terrible because of your misogyny. I'm not going to do it again, right? That's a paraphrase of I believe what she said to him, but she would not. She's like, no way, there's no way I'm doing this again, right? Because I've already been down this road. And she wouldn't give him an interview, right? And he begged her, right? He said flat out, he was like, he really tried, right? And she was right. She was 100% right. His whole book is an entire hit piece against Lorraine Williams. All right, so Professor Dungeon Master copies Ben Riggs, gets a disgruntled employee, and then puts that disgruntled employee in front of you and says, hey, look, everybody, 2024 D&D is going to do terrible, right? Now, why does he believe this, right? Well, because his view of Dungeons and Dragons is outrageously wrong at this point. It's so skewed and incomplete, right? So why does he think that? Well, because he thinks that when he talks about Dungeons and Dragons, he's like, oh, hey, that physical book, the physical 2024 DMG, PHB, and MM, they didn't sell so well. Now, first of all, he's got no evidence to support this. We don't know the numbers. We simply don't. Everybody continues to talk about it, but we just don't have the numbers. I can't tell you that it's the biggest print run ever. I think there's evidence of that. We can't really tell you that it's the smallest print run ever, and because we just don't know the numbers. That's the reality of it. And we would all love to know the numbers, but nobody knows the numbers, right? But here's the part that he's not telling you, okay? He's saying this because he thinks D&D is what it was in the 1980s, right? And why does he think this? Because he's a claw-clutching nostalgia devotee, right? He's like, oh, Dungeons and Dragons is just those 3 physical books. That's it, right? And what he won't tell you is that this year, right, in 1,000 shops across America, they're going to have Dungeons and Dragons conversations where 2 people are talking about Dungeons and Dragons. and metrics are going back, and dollars are going back, and D&D is going up, and neither of the people are even aware of Dungeons and Dragons, really, at the correct level, right? So a good example of this is Lego. Every single official Lego shop, some aunt is going to walk in, and her, and her Mensa cousin, all right, she's going to be like, oh, hey, I heard that Lego helps kids' brains, function. And they're like, yeah, and then the Lego store person will be like, yeah, that's right. And then, at that point, this aunt who knows nothing about Dungeons and Dragons is going to go, oh, what's this gigantic castle, right? My kid, he will not shut up about the Record of Lodos. He's into anime, right? And that person's like, Record of Lodos? Yeah, it has a bunch of castles and knights and wizards. Oh, well, that's what this set is. Lego Dungeons and Dragons, Red Dragon's Tale. We don't have a Record of Lodos one, but this has everything you just said. Castles, knights, wizards. Thanks. I'll take that $360. I'll take that $360. I'll take that $360 set right off the shelf. Thank you very much. The aunt don't know nothing about Dungeons and Dragons. She don't care about it, right? The Lego store manager, right? She's just selling a Lego set, right? She doesn't really care that it's Dungeons and Dragons, right? But that $360 goes to Lego, and it goes right back to Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. And then the aunt, when Netflix show arrives 6 months later, she's like, wait a second, Dungeons and Dragons, I bought my cousin a $360 set. It took him 2 months to build, and it's the best gift I ever gave him. I love Dungeons and Dragons, right? And it's not just this conversation. This same conversation is happening in collectible shops where they have Funko Pops. This same conversation is happening in board game clubs where they have Yahtzee. This same conversation is happening in mystery book clubs where they take a break and play Clue, Dungeons and Dragons Club, right? It does recently, Critical Role, right? They tried to get one of those ridiculous, useless players he has. Matthew Mercer carries that entire Critical Role team the way Michael Jordan carried the Bulls, right? Like, one of them, so they were like, oh, so some fan is like, are you going to use Daggerheart for this, or are you going to use Dungeons and Dragons rule set, right? And so one of those absolutely worthless Critical Role players says, we're going to use the Clue rule set. Yeah, I'm being clever. And then one of the other Critical Role players, right, says, oh, hey, you were trying to be clever there. Sorry. I know you were trying to say we're not going to answer the question, but Clue is actually canon to Dungeons and Dragons. There's literally Dungeons and Dragons Clue, the board game, and also, Ravnica crossed over with Clue, and Magic the Gathering is canon with D&D, and Clue is now canon to D&D in multiple threads, right? So your clever little joke actually just said we're playing D&D and not Daggerheart, and you're trying to be clever, but you actually gave a clue that we're going to run Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like, it was shocking how ignorant she was. Now, Critical Role players are naturally ignorant, right? But that's not the case with Professor Dungeon Master. He's being willfully ignorant. When he says that D&D is not going to do so well, he's ignoring, the new Amazon Prime show that'll come out, the new video games that will come out, literally Matthew Mercer sitting down with Jeff Bezos, literally, right? Like the possibility of that happening again, right? And, just so many threads of Dungeons and Dragons success that they literally can't even be counted by all the channels on YouTube. It's just, he knows this, right? He knows this, but he sticks his head in the sand and he clutches to willful ignorance. So the only way to say that D&D, that 2024 D&D is going to have a difficult year, right, or a difficult time coming up in the near future, is to ignore the fact that Dungeons and Dragons has completely shattered in every possible way, right? The relationship to has really fully shattered the relationship to traditional intellectual property structure. And its intellectual property has made Dungeons and Dragons and infiltrating intellectual property, and it will infiltrate hundreds of thousands of retail conversations, hundreds of thousands of video game interactions, hundreds of thousands of streaming interactions, and lift the name of Dungeons and Dragons effortlessly, quickly, effectively, in a way that no OSR or no indie, which Mike Burles and Professor Dungeon Master are telling you is going to have a great year. That's where the energy's at. It's at these OSRs and indies who have done nothing. Literally not even done a fraction of what Dungeons and Dragons has done to position themselves for a good year. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.